I'm in the next presentation as well. So if you have questions for me, I don't mind answering them when I go to the room in half an hour. So, yeah. The next one. This is a new presentation. All right. We just went from the analyst point of view. Now it's nice. We're going to go from the project management point of view, using the same framework again. So Jeremy is the lead analyst for the SMAP project, the same one that Zach works on. And he's going to talk to us about how the framework has helped him in managing the work that they're doing on SMAP. I'm here for backup if there's any technical questions about AMF and that. Go in here. Quick background. Probably those that have been in here for 3 have heard this already, and you probably say it with me. But basically, what is AMF? It provides high-level research-based ontology that allows information to be shared between IV&V tools. That's the whole purpose of it. If we decompose things too much, it reduces flexibility, modularity, and portability to design. So we want to keep simple objects that we can use in general terms. And the ones that we're using in the AMF are projects, participants, artifacts, assessments, and actions. And everything we do is just interesting combinations of those 5 pieces of information. If you look at 09-1, the technical framework, under 1.0 of the technical framework, it talks about some of the project management that IV&V does. It actually has a lot more to say than what I took from it, but I took a few pieces from that document. One thing that we're trying to do is continually review the IV&V effort. Revisions of the IMF is necessary based upon the updated mission project schedules, coordination of results with the developer, the promotion of our technical exchange between IV&V and the developer, and identification for improvements in our process of conducting IV&V. These are all some of the things that we're trying to address with the AMF for the PM side of the equation. It used to be the analysis management framework. For fiscal year 2014, it's the analysis and management framework. So we're going to be addressing things in 2014 more upfront with comparative reviews and IPEP and TSNR and selecting things from the catalog of methods, facing a compass tool, and so that you have that additional flow of information for your project, and that should help the project managers and project leads out. So I'll let Jeremy talk about this.
Thanks, Don. My name is Jeremy Fienhold. I am the project lead of the SMAP project here at the IV&V facility. You've already heard from Zach and Don's previous presentation. We're using the Analyst Workbench or AWB. I'll probably kind of go back and forth between using which terms I use, but so a lot of what you're going to see in the presentation here are kind of snapshots of individual windows of what Zach had already shown in the previous one. So there are little snippets of here and there. So we are still continuing to. This will continue to be a continuation of using the Eclipse front end to the AMF frameworks for what we have for SMAP. Again, like Zach said, from a standpoint of us being guinea pigs, there's good and bad parts to that. The bad part, obviously, is Don and the team hasn't completely got what they want, what they envisioned the tool and the database to be. At least it's getting there much closer now. As I've done the project a little over a year, we've continued. I came on as they already had it kind of rolling, and we try to continue to keep it moving forward and match what we need with the project. But the SMAP project was kind of the first one really utilizing in the day-to-day process. So the good part about it is, I can as we're doing stuff, I can bug Don and Tom Gillian add things in there as it seems like it'll help us out in either doing a day-to-day things or as we'll see kind of in here as we get into project end type of things, review capabilities and using the tool to actually support those types of things. Some of these things are going to be kind of a little bit of reiteration from before, but you can see up within, I don't know, does this show up if I move the cursor on them?
A little down.
Right. So you can see here again the artifacts. We're looking at the artifacts that we get from the project, and also artifacts that we'll create for our own use. You can see in here that we have requirement documentation we've loaded in, and that's from multiple sources. So we'll get those. That we have a process set up for 2 different sources. One from Doors, one's from Excel. From a web-based like a command dictionary that the project has given us availability to. We'll take those. Those we actually get on about a monthly basis. We have a process to import those in there. It automatically loads the process steps. It automatically loads the traces into the program into AWB, and then design documentation. Usually don't get that as often as an update, but we have functional design documents, interface control documents. We have access to the flight software wiki page, which is kind of a stand-in for software design documentation or design documents. We have implementation, which is more or less the code. We get the full build and we'll import it into the tool, into the database. Concept documentation. There's a lot of other things. I would imagine if I started over or was starting over with a new project, there's a lot of other things that we probably have put in there, but we kind of built as we went and put in what we needed as we went. So the one thing to kind of look, we'll get into in the next slide or so, is the IV&V team focus, and those are kind of artifacts, if you want to call them that way, that we've put in there. So mostly put in there from our side for scoping, for capabilities from our criticality assessment, which is kind of other terms for a PBRA. So we'll have those as our team focus, and that kind of ends up leading into what you kind of saw for evidence-based assurance, for communicating with the project on different types of needs. So the assurances for our particular project, we have a technical reference up here. We haven't completely filled that out as we would probably, again, do if we started a project new today using AWB, we'd go probably a little bit more detailed than that, but right now we're using in there as some of our reference in there from AWB as a standard. Assurance claims, which fold down into the assessments that, like what Zach was talking about. So we have assessments against requirements, assessments against design code, and so forth, tests, and then issues that would come out of that. So when we get all these assessments, the big thing is how do we attach them to each other? Assessments and artifacts, how do we attach those together to make sense to us, and then be able to portray that to the project or to the facility for the project. So the tracing that AWB allows us, some of them really kind of folds into AMF, but we can do any of the tracing we want. We can trace artifacts to artifacts, artifacts to assessments, assessments to assessments. You do what makes sense. A lot of these traces will automatically come with what we're importing. So the doors, the other requirements for us, our command dictionary, we import those, and those automatically get populated as for the tracing. Other things like the scoping, or in general, if you're doing an analysis, something we can just say this isn't traced to this. It might be an issue written against that, but we want to trace it to that. So somebody else coming down the line, if they're looking at this design document or something along those lines, they can quickly see in AWB what is pertinent to that information. So what should I be using if I'm going to assess this one piece of artifact? So the tracing is analyst driven at one level, and then that actually then leads into some of the scoping. So we can trace that down into to the next level. So you remember a couple slides ago, we had that 1.0, the IV&V technical framework 1.0, and this is the team focus. So some of the things that we have in there now, actually, need to talk back. I want to add some more things in here, but we have our focus from, you can see in the slide here that I don't know if you can see very well in here or not, but
It's harder with a PowerPoint. Sorry.
some of these will have a SNAP designation in here, and some of them have an IV&V. So the source of where these are coming from would either be from our assessment or our scoping, our planning. You can see we have modules set up in here. So, from the project, we'll get safety critical modules designated as such. We'll get new software modules. So software modules that aren't being reused or re-engineered, they're brand new, and full list. And then we have our coverage plan. So we'll have either full coverage or partial coverage of modules that we've got designated in there. And then critical behaviors, and that's kind of at the highest level. So when we do our initial planning within a project, we have behaviors of a particular project that that are of most interest to us, and that we want to concentrate our analysis on. So I guess we'll kind of dig into this in the next couple of slides and show you how the coverage and the overlapping of these two. These kind of the scoping can work and utilize AWB to actually demonstrate that we are covering those baselines. Okay. Again, these are coming from that previous slide. So again, you have parents, you have children. Each one of those levels you can dig down into. And in this case, we have on the left side we have the technical framework for what the project is defined as safety critical modules. On the right side of the screen, we have what we've defined based off other, project planning and things like that, what we've defined we want to do full coverage on. So these were put in the same screen, or put in different screens, and they've captured to put in here. But what we can use AWB for is actually to overlay those two to make sure we can tell the story, especially as we go into review, as we finish up a certain analysis task, as we go into, flight readiness reviews and things like that. That we can show these types of things, whether internally, because a lot of times externally when we go to the project, we don't have a whole lot of time to sit there and explain what we've done and why we've done it and what the results were. But some of these higher level charts would be good to kind of show that when we get to those stages of the project. But here you can see that if we were concerned about are we covering the right things, this would show us that yes, our plan is to cover the right things, because our safety critical modules, which obviously safety critical these should be of high importance to us, are part of what we plan to do full coverage on. Now, this is relatively simple example here, but this goes down to continue down the next level. Go down to what module for this module, what level 5 requirements are being covered, what are the assessments against that, so we can then like Zach was showing you, you can then right-click on these in the tool and bring up assessments that are associated with these. So we can show a full picture. Have we covered all these? I mean, are we supposed to do implementation assessment or a test analysis against these particular modules? And we can demonstrate that and show that visually. Now, again, this is a picture. It's nice for a quick summary, but then you can click on each one of these in the tool and see what the module is, what the assessment against that is, and why we felt like it was good. Now this one, I know you're not going to read, but I'll just try to talk through this. But this actually was an exercise that was prompted by the project for us, and what they wanted to know. Had a level 2 requirement that was of high interest for them going into a certification of flight readiness type review. Are the requirements that we have built up, are they set up in such a way, do they flow, do they trace in such a way that we can feel satisfied that we fully vetted that out? So what we're able to do with the analysis that we've already done and the tracing of bringing it to AWB is start up here at that high level. So we have a level 2 requirement here in the blue, and all the blue requirements, blue and yellow are requirements in this picture. If you can even see the colors, but we have the traces down to the next level. I mean, sometimes they trace to level 2, then they'll trace to level 3, following down to level 4, and following down to level 5. Now, from our standpoint at IV&V, and at least in SMAP 2, our concentration is the flight software. So we're focused on how the flight software is being implemented, is implementing everything from the higher level that we had assessed when we assessed those high level requirements needed to flow the flight software. So we've assessed these, and you can see the green assessments that are associated within here. These are all assessments and requirement assessments in this case. It could be anything. It could be implementation or design or something along those lines. In this case, we're looking at strictly requirement. They're tied right to these requirements. We've done an assessment against this requirement. We feel it's good. Then we follow it down to the next level. Those level 4 requirements here, we felt like we're fully traced up, fully flowed down. And those are kind of our 3 types of assessments we'll do against requirement validation. Make sure it's quality of the requirement's good. Make sure it traces up. Make sure it adequately flows down. And then it finally flows down to level 5. Now in this case, these other blue ones at the bottom are level 5 requirements, but they're support equipment, there's C&DH requirements, hardware requirements. The level 5s that we actually flow this completely down to are over here in the red. And then if we look at this picture as a whole, we can say, have we done the full assessment against this requirement trace all the way from the level 2 all the way down? Are all our assessments say, if you could read one of these, there's like a little word on the back side of the green that tells us what the assessment is from what the setting of the assessment is. So as we've done the analysis, we'll say this is good, there's an issue against this, there's a risk. So we can just look at this picture quickly and say, yes, everything to us looks like we've completely slowed that down. Again, you can click on anything in here and go back and look in the analyst workbench and say, okay, why did we say that was good? So we can look at the details behind what the analysts did at that point in time to say, yes, we feel like it's a good requirement, traced up, flowed down. Yes. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, yes, the completion definitely shows us. I think this shows completion. From our assessment, it would be good because we're assessing this whole flow from a flight software aspect. So that's where we would say it was good. Now we would tell the project, say, this is from a flight software or centric view of your particular concern. So if you're looking at hardware or anything concerns on that, then that's beyond what we would be in scope for us.
There are 2 different properties. The assessment state will tell you has the work been completed, and the validation state, which we're going to change the conclusion or results. They'll tell you, did we decide it was good, or did we decide it was an issue or a risk? So that's our track separately.
So yeah, what you're talking just overall or in general for like an assessment point of view?
Yeah. Okay. Real quick, the question is, can you switch between the assessment state and the result and show that? That capability is not in the UI for the tracing right now. There's no reason it couldn't be a good idea. Actually, request to use a little icon to show the assessment state in there. So it'll be a little picture. The other thing is in the search view, you can definitely do that in the search view, and then get the set you want, highlight it all, and say toss it up on a traceability graph, and it'll almost show what you asked for in the search view. So there's a way to get the answer you want today. You might not quite get the graphic you want today.
Yeah, so that's a really good point though too. As far as these settings here, one of the things that I use them for is just a completion standpoint. So if I'm looking at level 5 requirements and how far we were done, I can do filtered searches within those assessments and determine which ones of these are in progress or which ones of these have an issue against them and which ones they have a risk against them or they're all good. So I'll utilize these types of things for a lot of overall status of individual tasks. One of the things you'll notice here is the assessment state has a suspect listed right here on this one. So again, these two tabs down here will, once you were to click one of these green assessments here would show up in your work panel, and then they would have these settings here. So these have a suspect, which you can see isn't in the list here. So what that actually comes from is what we've done for change impact. So one of the big things that challenges I think we really face at IV&V is we start off with analysis, design, and test implementation, but a lot of the analysis we do or have done in the past, those requirements, those document everything, they change in time. And if we're on a project for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it might be, those things are definitely going to change in time. So how do we deal with that? How do we use the tool to assist us in limiting rework and limiting having to go do a full set of reanalysis of particular assessments or analyses? So what we kind of demonstrate here is one is up here. So for documents, so in this case, I'm assuming this is like a FDD or something. I think the ConOps. Okay, this was the ConOps. So when we got a new version of the ConOps, we ran the change impact on the import for a Word document in this case, and we can quickly see what the summary of the changes were in there for new elements, deleted elements, and so forth. Obviously, this will give us a big trigger to say this. It will mark it as modified, that document, and we can go back and do searches on that when we import new artifacts and say we need to look at this again because there was a pretty large change in this document. Same situation down here at the bottom. We have requirements in here. So when we import requirements from doors, we'll go ahead and do the process to export them from doors and import them into the database. But then we have a change tool that will go through that and check each of those requirements to see if they have changed from the previous version of the previous drop of that particular type of requirement. Some of these are pretty simple, like in the case of these requirements. We're only going to look at the description that it comes across there, so the requirement text. Some cases we'll use other types of import capabilities for our command dictionary. There may be, we export in Excel. There may be 5 or 6 columns in that document that we want to use as our change assessment to, if anything changes in any of those 5, tell us so we can go reassess it. So once it goes through all those artifacts that have just been imported, it'll mark this whether it's unchanged for the version state or it'll mark it as modified. If it goes through here and marks it as modified, it'll then go check and see if any of the assessments we've had against that particular artifact, or if there are any assessments against that particular artifact. If there are, it'll mark each of those artifacts as suspect, and that's just whenever we would do a new imported data, that would just be an automatic thing to go back and look and say, okay, which ones are suspect, and let's take a look at those and see why they're suspect, what happened, why it changed. This could be a case where that requirement doesn't exist in the new version. So those types of things would automatically trigger us to go back and reassess what happened in those cases. One of the, I think, really powerful capabilities, well, it's all powerful, but I think one of the coolest things that these guys have done is imported capability to do code change impact. It's pretty easy to do from a module-to-module standpoint, from one release to another, and you can go back and look at those changes. But what happens to for what we call in our project semantic assessment, where we're actually taking a requirement, a Lightsoft requirement, diving into the code and finding where it's established in there. So there may be 10 lines in the code that show where this particular requirement gets implemented. When we import a new version of the database, we want to know, has that assessment changed? And unless you go back to every one of those assessments you've done and look at them, we didn't really have a way to do that well before. So what they've imported into or put into the AWB is, I can't read the either. But this is actually a code block artifact, and it's actually the number of lines in this particular source file that satisfy the assessment, the semantic assessment of this requirement down here. So when we do the change impact, it'll go back, it'll check every one of those code blocks that we've created for those assessments, determine if those lines have changed, and it'll do a smart search for that. And it does a search, it does a compare, but it also tries to do a smart compare, so it doesn't, if there's bare lines or something, or a shift in lines, try not to alert us on those cases, but otherwise it'll try to let us know, will let us know when that code box has changed, and it'll mark that that assessment as being suspect for us to go back and take a look at it again. And lastly, I think this is my last slide. I'm going to pass it back to Don, but tasking groundwork. This is how is configuration management done with this? You can see we have a list of participants. So these would be our project personnel, past, present. Each of the assessments we put in there will tell us who created the assessment. In this case, it was brought in from another product, another tool, and then who's the last one to modify it. And then another thing that I think maybe Don will get if we get today or later on, but he's going to talk about doing actually tasking as another part of this. So as we move forward, from a project lead standpoint, we'll be actually to task particular analysis task against particular artifacts as we move forward.
Kind of talked to this a little bit earlier on, but where are we going with this now that we have the architecture in place? You can see the three layers are here. The green is the user interface layer. The red is our business layer, which is basically our interface contract. And then the data layer. IV&V is developing a data warehouse. We would definitely be talking to that. A lot of the stuff that we're doing now could get rolled into the data warehouse. We use that data warehouse concept. Continue to improve our connectivity to Orbit. We've actually started interfacing with ECM at this point. You'll see with the MS Office stuff that we just demonstrate tomorrow afternoon that our objects can actually reach out to ECM and get AMF compliant objects out of ECM for you from standard libraries and pull them in to use. You don't have to go hunting and pecking for them. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to work with it. User interface layer. This year, Analyst Workbench, Word, Excel, Orbit. Those are kind of the things that we concentrated on. Over the next year, we have this concept for a manager workbench with some admin functions, working with the risk tool and Compass and Confluence, and trying to get plugged into those environments as well for a UI. So this is the direction we're looking to go with the framework. And I think I just talked through this slide. Yeah, so improve Orbit integration. We're going to add better reporting capabilities, actually put a UI together for it. Configuring the project, we're going to put an admin screen in there that's going to be part of the managed workbench. And continue to offer guidance and support PBA technical reference, as well as trying to integrate with Compass environment. And that's what the whole action leg is trying to set up the support. So that's all we have.
I have a question. I have a question online. Charlie Price asks, does this or could this link in heritage software and prior TIMs of parents?
Yes, it can. As long as you pointed them to the interface, we can do it. And we'll be going next door. If you had some questions from the earlier session, Zach, we'll answer those to you during that. Get it?
Actually, we can't. We need to move on to the next one. Thank you.